family conflict. Do you have any earthly idea how much gasoline I could have filled my car with for the price of that frivolous purchase? David, my son-in-law, practically spat the words, his voice laced with a venom that stung far more than the accusation itself. He gestured wildly, his face flushed with indignation. A whole tank, easily. I've told you both, over and over again, cut back on your spending. Save every penny wherever you possibly can. But you two, he sneered, his gaze sweeping contemptuously over my husband, James, and me. You just throw money around like it grows on trees, wasting it on utterly unnecessary luxury nonsense. My daughter, Rachel, his loyal echo, chimed in, her tone sharp with an irritation that mirrored her husband's. Mom, honestly, why didn't you talk to me first before buying something like that? Do you genuinely think our household finances can comfortably handle you two spending money like this on a whim? The whole sorry episode had begun innocuously enough. That afternoon, while we were out grocery shopping, a mundane weekly chore, we happened to walk past a brightly lit wine promotion display. James, I noticed, paused in front of the rows of red wine, his gaze lingering for a long contemplative moment. A flicker of something akin to wistful hesitation crossed his eyes. He'd always had a particular soft spot for those small batch, artisanal reds, the ones with the charmingly old-fashioned, vintage-style labels. But in all the years we'd been living under Rachel and David's roof, ostensibly to help with our grandson Owen, he had barely touched a single drop of wine, his quiet pleasure sacrificed on the altar of their perceived financial prudence. A complicated, bittersweet mix of emotions stirred within me. Sadness for his quiet deprivations, a surge of defiant tenderness. I walked over to the display, my decision made in an instant, and quietly, deliberately, picked out a bottle of his favorite Cabernet Sauvignon, placing it gently into our shared shopping basket. Emily, he began, following me with a surprised expression, clearly starting to say something, perhaps to dissuade me, but then he stopped himself halfway, a familiar resignation in his posture. I gave him a gentle, reassuring smile. Honey, I said softly, it's our wedding anniversary next week. A little bit of good wine to celebrate 35 years together. What's the harm in that? After dinner that evening, a meal I had, as usual, prepared and served, just as James was reaching for the corkscrew, preparing to open our modest celebratory bottle, Rachel and David unexpectedly walked through the front door. The moment the door swung open, the unmistakable, cloying smell of stale alcohol drifted into the room, preceding them. David stumbled slightly as he entered the living room, his movements uncoordinated, clearly inebriated. I frowned instinctively, an unwelcome wave of irritation and disapproval rising in my chest. He ambled over to the dining table, where James and I were sitting, then stopped abruptly, his unfocused gaze fixing on the bottle of wine. You bought this? He asked sharply. James, ever the peacemaker, forced a small, conciliatory smile. Yes, David. It's been quite a while since we've all had a drink together. We thought we'd celebrate our anniversary a little. But David, fueled by alcohol and a sense of aggrieved entitlement, immediately exploded. That goddamn bottle probably cost enough to fill up my entire gas tank. James, his face paling, quickly tried to explain, to placate. It was on sale, David, really. Just a little over $30. David's face darkened further, his voice remaining loud and cutting, despite James' attempt at mollification. Over $30, and you think that's cheap? I wouldn't even dream of buying something so extravagant for myself. I've been saying this all along. Everything is getting ridiculously expensive these days. We need to cut back, to be more frugal. But you too, his gesture encompassed both James and me. You just don't seem to care about any of it, do you? Then, he turned his drunken ire on Rachel, snapping at her. Why aren't you keeping your parents in check? Don't they listen to you? Rachel, never one to be outdone in a display of righteous indignation, didn't hesitate to jump into the fray. Dad, that was really irresponsible of you, she began, her tone sharp and reproachful. Why didn't you talk to me first before making such a purchase? You know perfectly well how tight things are for us right now. Owen will be starting school soon, and the fees are exorbitant. David's new business project is still short on funding. There's money going out in every conceivable direction, and you are wasting it on this. I looked at James. Just moments ago, he had been so cheerful, his eyes sparkling with anticipation for our small celebration. Now his face was sinking into a familiar mask of sadness and quiet resignation. A spark, hot and fierce, ignited in my chest. I stood up from the table, my movements deliberate, and said calmly, but with an unyielding firmness that surprised even myself, "I bought the wine, Rachel, David. It had absolutely nothing to do with your father." I turned to face them fully, fury boiling just beneath the surface of my voice. "You keep talking incessantly about saving money, about fiscal responsibility. Then what about your $6,000 watch, David? Or your $5,000 designer purse, Rachel? And let's be perfectly honest here, shall we? Those luxury items, those weren't purchased with your own hard-earned money, were they? They were charged to our retirement credit card, a card you borrowed, and conveniently forgot to return." David, momentarily flustered, tried to justify himself. That's different, Emily. I need that watch to look professional for work, to make a good impression on clients." Rachel, equally unapologetic, spoke up, her chin tilted defiantly. "Dad, if I walked into my office carrying a cheap, unbranded bag, people would laugh at me. My image is important for my career." I was shaking with a rage that had been suppressed for far too long. "You all have your carefully constructed reasons, your justifications for your own extravagances. But what about us? What about James and me? We receive nearly $7,000 a month in retirement income, money we earned through decades of hard work, and you're telling us, your parents, that we're not even allowed to enjoy a single inexpensive bottle of wine to mark a special occasion. Whose life exactly are you trying?" Suddenly, Owen, our young grandson, burst into frightened tears, overwhelmed by the shouting and the palpable tension in the room. James, his face etched with pain, quickly scooped the trembling child into his arms, trying to soothe him, murmuring comforting words. "Please," he implored, his voice strained, "let's not fight like this. It's just a bottle of wine. If it's such a terribly big deal, I'll see if the store will take it back tomorrow." "No," I said coldly, my gaze fixed unwaveringly on Rachel and David. "We are not at an age where we need to ask for anyone's permission to enjoy our own lives, to spend our own money. That wine, I bought it, and I've earned the right to enjoy it. And let me tell you both this, if you want more money, then go out and earn it yourselves. Don't hang your hopes, your financial aspirations, on us, on our retirement funds. And Rachel," my voice softened almost imperceptibly, "if you really went to Cal yourself." And with that, I took James by the hand, his fingers cold and trembling in mine, and walked back to our small, sparsely furnished room at the back of their house. That bottle of wine, James never did drink it. The next morning, he quietly, without a word, gave it to our elderly neighbors next door. Later that morning, David showed up at our bedroom door, looking sheepish and genuinely remorseful. I had far too much to drink last night," he muttered, his eyes downcast. "I said a whole bunch of stupid, hurtful things. I feel absolutely awful about it." Then, to my astonishment, he actually slapped himself hard, twice, across the face and mumbled, "I'm such a damn fool." Rachel followed right behind him, her face arranged in an expression of exaggerated, almost theatrical guilt. "We both had some wine last night too, Mom, Dad," she said, her voice overly bright. "We certainly didn't mean to be so harsh. Please don't take it to heart, okay?" I looked at their forced, insincere smiles, their overly performative apologies, and let out a short, cold snort of disbelief. I didn't even bother to meet their eyes. Rachel, noticing my continued indifference, my refusal to be placated, immediately looked aggrieved. She turned her pleading gaze to James. "Dad?" James sighed, a deep, weary sound, and gently patted my shoulder. Speaking softly, almost as if to himself, he said, "We're family, Emily. There's no real need to hold on to grudges overnight. Let it go, for peace sake." His words, though well-intentioned, eased only a tiny bit of the fire still smoldering in my chest. Seeing the mood begin to thaw, however slightly, Rachel quickly seized the moment, her demeanor instantly shifting to one of forced cheerfulness. "It's been such a long time since we all went out together as a family. We've all got the day off today. Why don't we go out and get some fresh air? Maybe do a little window shopping?" James, always the eternal peacemaker, always desperate to smooth over any familial discord, seemed eager to restore harmony and insisted we join them. We didn't plan to shop for anything much, just a casual stroll through the downtown area. But as we ambled along the main street, a charming vintage clothing store caught my eye. The display window showcased a beautiful white dress, exquisitely patterned with delicate blue florals, a style reminiscent of my youth. I couldn't help but linger, my gaze drawn to its timeless elegance. James, ever observant of my smallest reactions, noticed my interest and chuckled softly. "You like it, Emily?" I nodded, a wistful smile touching my lips. He immediately opened the shop door and gently, encouragingly, nudged me inside. The shop was a treasure trove, filled with an array of beautiful vintage dresses, elegant prints, and fine, forgotten fabrics. The one I'd been admiring from the window hung right in the center of the boutique, a place of honor. I walked over to it, my fingers brushing lightly across the soft, time-worn fabric, already falling a little in love with its quiet charm. It was exactly the kind of graceful feminine style I used to adore when I was a younger woman. But ever since we had moved in with Rachel and David, and had taken on the primary responsibility of caring for Owen, I hadn't worn anything remotely like it. I still remembered, with a pang of old hurt, David once sneering at me when I'd worn a similarly patterned blouse. "What are you trying to pull, Emily? Wearing those floral things? It's not like you're on some tropical vacation, you know." After that cutting remark, I'd quietly stopped wearing them altogether, relegating my brighter, more expressive clothes to the back of the closet. James seemed to notice my hesitation, the shadow of old insecurities crossing my face. He waved over a friendly store clerk. "Excuse me, can you please help my wife find her size in this particular dress?" I hesitated, a wave of self-consciousness washing over me. "Oh, James, at my age, wouldn't this kind of dress look a little silly on me?" James gave me a warm, steady, reassuring smile. "You used to love this style, Emily. What on earth makes you think it's not right for you now?" The clerk chimed in, her voice bright and encouraging. "Every age has its own unique charm, madam. You have beautiful skin and such a graceful air about you. This dress would look absolutely stunning on you, I'm sure." With their combined reassurance, I stepped into the fitting room. When I walked out, wearing the dress, the clerk's eyes lit up with genuine delight. She clapped her hands together enthusiastically. "Oh, absolutely gorgeous. It's like it was made just for you." Nervously, I turned to James, seeking his honest opinion. "What do you think, dear?" He looked at me, and I saw such profound tenderness, such unreserved admiration in his eyes, that it made my heart ache. "Just as beautiful as ever, Emily," he said softly. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, staring at the reflection of the woman in that familiar, beloved style of dress. And in that transformative moment, I felt as if I'd rediscovered a long-lost, precious piece of myself. My confidence, my innate grace, the vibrant, joyful woman I'd almost completely forgotten existed. Just as I was about to pull out my own bank card to pay for the dress, a purchase I felt truly excited about, Rachel and David, having evidently completed their own shopping expedition, found us and walked noisily into the small boutique. They were both lugging several large, ostentatious shopping bags emblazoned with high-end designer logos. Rachel, catching her breath, complained loudly, "Ugh, this is absolutely exhausting. Mom, Dad, why did you wander off like that without telling us? We've been searching all over for you. We're completely done with our shopping now. Let's just head home." David was conspicuously fanning his collar with his hand, clearly irritated and in no mood to be out any longer. As Rachel stepped closer, her sharp eyes landed on the vintage floral dress I was still wearing. She froze for a second, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly as she quickly scanned the store's interior, then marched directly over to the display rack, brazenly flipping through the price tags. "Mom," she said, her voice edged with a familiar condescension, though she attempted a forced, placating smile. "At your age, is this dress really appropriate?" The genuine smile that had illuminated my face just moments before faltered, then died. "What's inappropriate about it, Rachel?" James shot back, his voice laced with a cold, biting chuckle. "Is it really the style you have a problem with, Rachel? Or is it the price?" He pointed an accusatory finger at the mountain of expensive shopping bags at their feet. "So it's perfectly reasonable in your view for you two to spend hundreds, if not thousands, on whatever designer frippery you desire. But the moment your mother wishes to buy a single, modest dress for herself, it's suddenly a problem, a waste of money." Rachel's expression changed instantly, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. She quickly tucked her hoard of shopping bags behind her back, as if to hide the evidence of her own extravagance, and forced another strained smile in my direction. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that, honestly. I was just being, well, honest. Please don't take it personally. But you're 65 now. This dress, it's just a bit too flashy for you, don't you think? It doesn't exactly scream graceful or age-appropriate." She gestured vaguely toward the people walking past the shop window outside. "Look around, Mom. Everyone's dressed so simply these days. Comfort is what really matters at our age. And besides," her voice dropped to a conspiratorial mutter, "you're always in the kitchen cooking, or doing laundry, or chasing after Owen. How is a delicate dress like that even practical for your lifestyle?" Her critical eyes then drifted over to James, and she added, under her breath but loud enough for us both to hear, "And with that very short haircut, Mom, honestly, it just looks rather odd." James's face hardened, his jaw tightening. "You ungrateful girl," he snapped, his patience finally exhausted. "Do you even remember why your mother cut her hair so short? She used to love her long hair, wore it beautifully." His words struck something deep, a forgotten sorrow within me. Yes, I used to wear my hair long, always. It was my one small vanity. But when I first started caring for baby Owen, he, like all infants, would constantly grab at my hair, tugging at it painfully until I winced. James had gently scolded him for it, of course, but Rachel and David, typically, couldn't have cared less about my discomfort. They only worried that the child might inadvertently get scratched by my longer hair. They had even, subtly at first, then more overtly, blamed me for it, implying I was somehow being careless. In the end, weary of the constant pulling and the unspoken criticism, I had given in and had it all cut off. I had never grown it out again. The store clerk, sensing the escalating tension, quickly stepped in, attempting to ease the situation with professional diplomacy. "Actually, madam," she interjected smoothly, "short hair has its own unique elegance. With a vintage-style dress like this one, it can beautifully highlight a woman's features, her character. There's a definite grace and confidence in that particular pairing." Rachel let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "Of course you'd say that. You're just trying to make a sale. You people could probably sell snow to an Eskimo." She turned back to me, her expression one of feigned helpfulness. "Mom, I just passed a little shop earlier, just down the street, with clothes that look super soft and lightweight, much more practical. And they're having a big sale, way cheaper than this expensive stuff. That style might suit you much better. We're walking right past it anyway on the way to the car. Let's just stop in quickly and take a look." The clerk looked embarrassed and uncomfortable, offering only a polite, strained smile before quietly stepping back behind the counter, retreating from the family drama. David chimed in as well, his tone bored and dismissive. "Honestly, Emily, buying a dress like this is just a complete waste of good money. You'd get far more value putting that cash towards some good quality whiskey, or perhaps a few fine cigars for me." In that single, illuminating moment, all I felt was a pure, bone-deep, soul-crushing disappointment. Everything, all their past actions, their present criticisms, became so painfully, undeniably clear. That bottle of wine, this beautiful dress, or indeed, anything that James and I might ever want to buy for ourselves. In their self-absorbed eyes, it would always be deemed wasteful, extravagant, unnecessary. Only when the money was spent on them, on their desires, their perceived needs, did it suddenly become reasonable, acceptable, or worthwhile. As James was still heatedly arguing with them, defending my right to a small indulgence, I quietly stepped back into the fitting room and changed back into my dull, drab, gray dress. The one Rachel always called practical and appropriate for someone of my age and station. When I came out, the spark of joy that had illuminated my face just moments before was completely gone. That radiant smile I'd worn while looking in the mirror, the one that had reflected a glimpse of my younger, more vibrant self, had faded to nothing but a pale, sad shadow. James saw the change in me instantly, and his own expression fell, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Without saying another word, he pulled out his wallet and handed the store clerk our joint savings card. "We'll take the dress," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "And please, pick out a few more in her size, in similar styles. We'll take them all." Rachel and David's faces changed instantly, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning outrage at this unexpected act of defiance. I gently reached for James's hand, squeezing it tightly. He looked at me, his gaze steady and resolute, a silent understanding passing between us. After we paid, we walked out of the boutique without looking back, leaving Rachel and David standing amidst their piles of expensive shopping bags, their mouths agape. On the quiet, tense ride home, neither James nor I spoke a word. We stared out the car window in a shared, heavy silence, each lost in our own troubled thoughts. In the distance, the sun was sinking slowly, majestically, behind the urban horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and crimson. I turned to look at James, and the fading, melancholic light painted his dear, familiar face with a soft, solemn gray. My chest ached with a dull, persistent heaviness. I reached over and took his hand, a spontaneous gesture of comfort and solidarity. He looked at me, puzzled by my uncharacteristic display of affection in front of the children. I gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. "I'm fine," I whispered, though the words felt like a lie. But deep down, I knew, with an unshakable certainty, that something fundamental within me had shifted, completely and irrevocably. The patient, accommodating Emily was no more. That night, Rachel and David, predictably, went out again for another important social dinner, leaving James and me to care for Owen. At the dinner table, it was just James and me, with young Owen sitting nearby, engrossed in cartoons on his tablet, pointedly refusing to eat the healthy meal I had prepared. James sat there quietly, his own plate untouched, his face clouded in a somber, reflective silence. "James," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper, looking at him across the table. He lifted his head, his eyes heavy with a weariness that seemed to go bone deep. "James," I repeated, my voice gaining a quiet firmness, "let's go back home." He froze for a moment, a sudden flicker of surprised light flashing in his tired eyes. But then, just as quickly, it faded, as if something, some unwelcome thought, had suddenly come to mind and snuffed it out. I knew exactly what he was thinking. The practical obstacles, the emotional ties that still bound him. Just then, Owen, who had apparently been eavesdropping, jumped up from his seat and rushed over to my side, his young eyes lighting up with an unexpected, almost manic excitement. "Grandma, did you just say you're going somewhere? Are you moving out? Are you really, really leaving?" I paused for a second, taken aback by his unrestrained enthusiasm, and then managed a faint, slightly strained smile. "Maybe, sweetheart. But why are you so excited about that possibility?" Owen clapped his hands together, beaming with pure, unadulterated delight. "Of course I'm excited. Once you and Grandpa leave, then Grandpa Jay and Grandma Anna can come and live here with us." He went on, his voice cheerful and completely, devastatingly, unaware of the profound chill that was settling over my heart. "They love me so much. Every time we visit their house, they give me all kinds of yummy snacks, popcorn, Skittles, soda, everything. But you guys never ever buy that fun stuff for me?" He paused, then added, his expression earnest. I heard Dad talking to Mom. He said once we move into the big new house, you'd go back to live in your old hometown. And then Grandpa Jay and Grandma Anna can come and live with us here permanently. So, if you're leaving now, does that mean I get to see them sooner? He bounced up and down in place, practically glowing with uncontainable excitement, each innocent, artless word hitting me like a fresh shard of ice. Jay and Anna, David's parents. So, the grandparents Owen loved most, the ones he was so eager to have move in, were the ones who rarely ever saw him, who contributed nothing to his daily care, not the ones who had tirelessly, lovingly cared for him every single day since his birth. Rachel and David had been making elaborate plans to enroll Owen in a prestigious and very expensive private elementary school across town. The homes in that desirable school district were, predictably, priced well beyond what their own meager savings could possibly cover. Even the substantial amount that James and I had carefully set aside over the years for our own future needs wasn't nearly enough for a down payment on such a property. Their plan, I now realized with a sickening, dawning clarity, was brutally clear. Sell our old, paid-for house back in our hometown to cover the hefty down payment on their new, aspirational home. Drain our remaining life savings to renovate and furnish this new house to their exacting standards. And then, once they eventually sold the place they currently lived in, they would use that money to cover the ongoing mortgage payments on their upgraded lifestyle. We only have one child, Rachel, and we had always unquestioningly assumed that everything we had accumulated over our lifetimes would naturally, eventually, go to her someday. It had always felt natural, even right. But now, had David, had Rachel, ever once spared a thought for what would happen to us once our old house, our only remaining independent asset, was sold? Where would we go? That house, our former home, hadn't been lived in for over a decade. It was by now probably falling apart, dilapidated, likely uninhabitable without significant, costly repairs. I stared at Owen's beaming, innocent little face, and all I felt was a profound, desolate coldness. Does your mom know about all this, Owen? I asked softly, my voice carefully neutral. Of course, Owen replied without a moment's hesitation, his excitement undiminished. Mom said she's going to take Grandpa Jay and Grandma Anna out to explore the city when they come. They've never even been here before. That night, James and I ate our dinner in a heavy, oppressive silence. Rachel and David came home late again, their voices loud and boisterous from the living room. I heard the clinking of glasses, their raucous laughter. There was no need to guess. They'd clearly been drinking heavily again. I sat up in bed for a long, long time, the sounds of their revelry a mocking counterpoint to the turmoil in my own mind, turning everything over and over until finally my chaotic thoughts settled into something sharp, clear, and unshakable. I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, the decision solidifying with each passing, restless hour. I turned on my side, looking at James's dear, sleeping face in the dim moonlight. Do you remember, I whispered, my voice barely audible, what we used to talk about, dream about before we retired? I reached up and gently brushed the silver strands of hair back from his temple. Then I leaned close and whispered my plan into his ear. James froze, his eyes suddenly flying wide open with surprise, then dawning comprehension. I simply gave him a quiet, resolute smile and held his hand tighter. No more words were needed between us. Everything was decided. Not long after that fateful night, the old house we had reluctantly listed with a local real estate agency finally found a buyer. The moment Rachel and David heard the news, they were overjoyed, practically ecstatic, and insisted on going to see the new property they had picked out themselves that very same day. They were practically buzzing with an almost unseemly excitement. When I informed them that James and I would be traveling back to our hometown to handle the final details of the sale in person, they agreed without a moment's hesitation, their minds clearly already occupied with decorating their future grand residence. David even, with a magnanimity that now seemed utterly transparent, offered to drive us to the airport. Just before we left, Rachel reminded us again and again, with an almost desperate urgency, not to worry about Owen, that they would manage fine, and to please take care of all the business quickly so we could finalize the house sale without any delay. David, with a show of practicality, handed me a new bank card and said, "Have the buyer transfer the full payment directly to this account, Mom. It's all going towards the down payment on the new house anyway, so it just simplifies things." With their hopeful, expectant eyes fixed firmly upon us, James and I set off for our hometown. But just before boarding our flight, I paused by a trash bin in the bustling airport terminal and with a small, decisive gesture tossed that new bank card, their conduit to our future, into its depths. The very first thing we did when we got back to our hometown was open a brand new bank account, in our names only, and immediately reroute all our monthly retirement payments there. Over the next few days, we finalized the house sale, signing the papers with a sense of quiet liberation, and then proceeded to clear out most of our remaining lifelong belongings from the old house, except for a few old, comfortable jackets James had always particularly loved. Everything else, all the accumulated detritus of a past life, we left behind without a backward glance. 2 weeks later, the southern coast where we had chosen to begin our new life was warm and breezy in the evenings. James and I sat contentedly on the porch of the small, charming cottage we'd rented, sipping freshly brewed coffee and enjoying a simple, delicious dinner we had prepared together. That's when James's phone rang, shattering the peaceful ambience. It was Rachel. He answered, and before he could even say a word, her voice, sharp and full of irritation, came crackling through the line. "Dad, it's been 2 whole weeks. Has the house sold yet or not? When are you guys coming back?" She sounded frantic, her words tumbling out in a rush. "We've already picked out the new place, but it's a really hot market right now. The agent is only holding it for us for a few more days. We practically had to beg for that extension. If you don't sign the contract soon, we're going to lose it." She paused for a fraction of a second, then added, her tone accusatory, "And by the way, your retirement money didn't come through this month like it usually does. You'd better call the bank first thing tomorrow and find out what went wrong." James calmly set down his fork and knife and meticulously wiped his mouth with a napkin before answering her. "Oh, right, Rachel," he said, his voice remarkably casual, almost nonchalant. "There's something we forgot to tell you. Your mother and I, well, we've decided to take a little trip. A rather extended one, actually. We're not coming back." There was a stunned, pregnant pause on the other end of the line. Then her voice shot up an octave, laced with disbelief and dawning fury. "What? What do you mean you're not coming back? And what about the house, the sale? Oh, and as for that new house you want so badly, Rachel," James continued, his tone still infuriatingly steady, "we don't think it's really necessary for you to purchase it right now. Especially since, if we're being honest, you don't really have the savings to comfortably afford it, do you? And that retirement check you're asking about, it went for Jane, for." He said quietly, his gaze fixed on the distant, darkening horizon. "We often give up everything, our autonomy, our dreams, out of fear. Fear of aging, fear of illness, fear of dying alone and uncared for. So we convince ourselves foolishly that it's somehow safer, wiser, to depend on our children, to have control of our lives, our finances." That evening, I sat alone in the fragrant garden of our little rented cottage for a long, long time, watching the final, vibrant streaks of sunset fade slowly into the deepening twilight. And as the first stars began to prick the velvety night sky, a profound sense of peace, of rightness, settled over me. The next morning, I brushed my hair until it shone, neatly pinning it up in a soft, elegant style I hadn't worn in years, and slipped into my favorite floral vintage dress, the one that had caused such a commotion. When James saw me standing tall again, a quiet confidence radiating from my posture, a genuine, unforced smile gracing my lips, he finally let out a long, slow breath of profound relief, as if a great weight had been lifted from his own shoulders. From that day forward, the world gained a pair of contented sunset companions, A couple who had fully, irrevocably walked away from the chaos and demands of their former family life, choosing instead to live simply, joyfully, and solely for themselves. We rented a cozy little house with a rambling, sun-drenched garden in a warm, peaceful southern town, just a few steps away from a calm, glistening lake. Each morning, we walked hand in hand along the lake's edge, sometimes biking along the shaded paths, sometimes jogging at a leisurely pace. Afterward, we'd head to the bustling local farmers market to pick out fresh, seasonal ingredients for the day's meals. If we had extra time after the market, we'd hop in our old, reliable car and drive to neighboring charming towns, explore hidden wooded trails, or discover quiet, secluded bays, always chasing fleeting glimpses of nature's enduring beauty. James would wear his favorite relaxed, comfortable button-down shirts and a wide-brimmed straw hat to shield him from the sun. And I'd always bring along my camera, delighting in capturing the newfound calm and grace that now rested so visibly between his dear, familiar eyes. I began taking care of myself again, truly nurturing myself, for the first time in decades. For all those years at Rachel's, I'd worn loose, drab, shapeless clothes, my hair cut brutally short purely for convenience, nothing more. But now, I let it grow out again, reveling in its returning softness. "I don't mind the ease of short hair, James," I told him one sunny afternoon, gently brushing my fingers through the silky strands that now reached the nape of my neck. "But oh, how I miss the softness, the inherent grace of long hair." As it grew longer, I began pinning it up again in the elegant chignons I used to love, pairing these classic hairstyles with my collection of favorite vintage dresses, each one a rediscovered treasure. James would always look at me then, his eyes shining with a love that felt brand new, and say, his voice thick with emotion, "You're even more beautiful now, Emily, than you were all those years ago when we first met." After a light, healthy lunch, we'd often take a short nap, a delicious, guilt-free indulgence. In the afternoons, James would settle contentedly by the window with a good book, while I immersed myself in learning new skills, photography, video editing, even a little bit of online marketing for a potential future project. We each slipped easily into our own little worlds of quiet creativity and learning. And before we knew it, the entire afternoon would drift peacefully, productively by. Every few weeks, we'd take a short, adventurous trip, exploring quaint small towns, driving along scenic coastal roads, and discovering quiet, picturesque harbors. Our footprints, both literal and metaphorical, slowly began to mark the map of everywhere we'd wandered together, rediscovering not just the world, but also each other. On one of those memorable trips, we met a charming, energetic young man named Chris, a traveling content creator who made his living documenting his adventures. Out of curiosity, I later looked up his social media account and was astonished to see he had over 20 million followers worldwide. What made us both laugh was that he quickly, and with an endearing earnestness, declared himself my biggest fan, playfully begging me to let him call me his godmother. "I always thought that vintage style, that kind of timeless elegance, belonged only to people like my own mom," he'd explained, his eyes shining with genuine admiration. "But meeting you, Catherine," he always called me by my full first name, which I found rather endearing, made me realize that true style isn't just something you wear, it's something you live. His own mother and grandmother, he told us, had both been passionate aficionados of vintage culture, instilling in him a deep appreciation for its enduring beauty. So when he met a woman around his own mother's age who still so clearly, so confidently, held on to her own unique sense of beauty and personal identity, he felt an unexpected, profound warmth and respect. Since that serendipitous meeting, I became not just the cherished subject of James's quiet, loving photographs, but also, rather unexpectedly, the occasional muse in Chris's vibrant, professionally shot lens. With my full permission, he posted a few short, artful video clips of us online, simple, candid moments of our new, peaceful life. And to everyone's utter surprise, especially ours, the videos caught on like wildfire, resonating with an audience starved for authenticity. It was because of those viral clips, those gentle, quiet snapshots of our contented, independent life, that Rachel and David, after more than half a year of complete and utter silence between us, finally came looking for us. They arrived at our little rented cottage looking exhausted, their eyes bloodshot and shadowed, clearly having had little to no sleep the night before. Over the past 6 months, Rachel and David had, indeed, called countless times, sent dozens of increasingly desperate messages. I had ignored every single one of them. So, their panicked, disheveled expressions now didn't surprise me in the least. "Dad?" Rachel rushed in the moment James opened the door, her voice urgent and strained, her face a complicated, unattractive, twisted mask of tangled emotions, fear, anger, resentment, and a dawning, desperate plea. "You and Mom, you just disappeared, without a single word. We've been searching everywhere for you. I even went all the way back to the old house in your hometown. It's sold now, completely empty, and still you're not coming back to us. Why, Dad? Why are you doing this?" David, uncharacteristically silent, didn't say a word. He walked straight out to the garden and dropped heavily into one of the weathered wooden chairs, as if the mere act of finally finding us had resolved everything, had exhausted his last ounce of energy. Just then, I stepped outside from the kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron, and took a seat at the small garden table opposite him. Rachel stared at me for several long, charged seconds before finally speaking, her voice barely a whisper. "Mom, David?" Who had been slumped despondently in the chair, suddenly straightened, his eyes flicking nervously towards James, then to me. He scratched his head awkwardly, a forced, unnatural smile stretching his lips. "Well, it's really good to see you again, Catherine. You look younger than ever. I barely recognized you." I let out a short, cold, dismissive snort and said nothing. "If you've got something specific to say, then say it now," James interjected, his voice firm. "We're heading to the morning market very soon." Only then did Rachel and David seem to fully realize that we weren't in the mood for superficial pleasantries or drawn-out recriminations. Rachel jumped to her feet, her composure shattering. "What market? Let's just pack up your things and go home already. It's been over 6 long months. You missed your chance on the last house we picked out, and now it's gone, sold to someone else. We just found another one. It's not quite as nice, admittedly, but it's good enough. We need to get moving on this immediately. Once we're all back home together, we can put down the money from the old house sale and lock it in." So, that was what they had really come for. They hadn't come to see us, to reconnect, to apologize. They had come to see the money. I seethed internally, a familiar wave of disappointment washing over me, but I didn't bother responding to her demands. David shot Rachel a subtle, warning look. She caught on immediately, and with a practiced ease that spoke volumes, slid over next to me on the garden bench, looping her arm through mine with a display of forced, cloying affection. "Mom," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "are you still mad about that silly dress incident? I swear, Mom, I had absolutely no idea how much you genuinely liked those vintage styles. And honestly, now that I see you in them more, you look absolutely stunning. If you want, I'll get you a few new ones every season. Different styles, different colors, so you can switch it up, okay?" She paused, letting out a theatrical, heartfelt sigh. "Oh, Mom, Owen's been crying every single day since you left, saying he misses you terribly. He's barely eating anything. He's lost so much weight. It's breaking my heart to see him like this. You raised him from the very start, Mom. He simply can't live without you." Don't you care about your only grandson?" I smiled faintly, a cool, detached smile that didn't reach my eyes. "If I like a dress, Rachel, I am perfectly capable of buying it for myself now. As for Owen, well, there's more than one person in his life who can, and should, love him. All I want now, for the remainder of my days, is to spend them peacefully, contentedly, with your father." Then, I gently, decisively, pulled my arm away from her clinging grasp and stood up. "You should go now," I said calmly, walking over to the garden gate, my voice cool, sharp, and unequivocally final. "Live within your means. If you want a new house, then you pay for it yourselves. We are not coming back. Ever." Rachel froze for a second, her face flushing a deep, angry crimson with frustration, her carefully constructed facade of contrition crumbling. Her voice rose, shrill and hostile. "So, that's it then. You're really truly cutting us off completely? What happens when you're old and sick? Who's going to take care of you then, huh? We never counted on you for that, Rachel," I said plainly, waving my hand dismissively as if swatting away an annoying gnat. Then I turned my gaze to David, my tone shifting almost imperceptibly, becoming even colder. "You've brought your own parents over to live with you now, haven't you, David?" He blinked in surprise, avoiding my direct gaze, giving me a quick, guilty sideways glance before slowly, reluctantly, nodding his admission. I gave a soft, knowing, almost pitying laugh. "You see? You didn't even need to ask us to leave. We stepped aside all on our own, made it easy for you. Now you've got your whole little preferred family back together. Nice and early." His eyes widened in genuine shock, his entire body seeming to freeze in place. Rachel's face went deathly pale, her expression mirroring his, stiff, stunned, and utterly speechless. Just then, a familiar, cheerful voice rang out at the garden gate. "Hey, Catherine, James. Weren't we supposed to hit the farmer's market together this morning? What happened? Did I get the time wrong?" Chris, our young content creator friend, appeared at the entrance, grinning broadly as he walked into the garden. The moment he stepped inside, he came face to face with Rachel and David. He froze for a second, his smile faltering, then quickly, intelligently, pieced things together. "Oh," he said, his tone changing. "So it's you two. No wonder they skipped the market today." Then he turned to me, his cheerful smile returning. "Catherine, aren't you going to introduce me to your, friends?" David's expression instantly twisted with a renewed, impotent fury. "Oh, I see how it is now," he spat, laughing bitterly, a harsh, ugly sound, as he jabbed an accusatory finger in Chris's direction. "No wonder you two old fools don't want to come back home. You've been completely charmed, taken in, by this young punk." He gestured wildly between us. "You think I don't see what's really going on here? You, cozying up to two vulnerable old people, pretending to be all sweet and helpful. Don't think for a second I don't know what you're really after. You're after their money, aren't you? Their house. Do you even know whose money that is? You've got some damn nerve, you little lech." And then, like a baited bull seeing red, David charged straight at Chris, his fists clenched. My heart clenched in sudden fear. David was tall and heavily built, while Chris, though young and agile, was lean and wiry. If it actually came down to a physical fight, I wasn't sure Chris could handle him. I started to get up, to try and intervene, to prevent a senseless escalation. Then came a loud, sharp, sickening thud. In one clean, fluid, almost balletic motion, Chris expertly flipped David over his shoulder and slammed him hard onto the unforgiving ground. David landed with a heavy, groaning impact, sprawled ignominiously across the garden path, unable or unwilling to immediately get up. Chris calmly dusted off his sleeves, glancing down at David's prone form with a disdainful frown. "Seriously? That's all you've got?" James and I were frozen in stunned disbelief for a second, then both burst into spontaneous, unrestrained laughter. Who would have ever thought this soft-spoken, artistic young man was such a hidden powerhouse? Rachel and David eventually left, empty-handed, thoroughly humiliated, and, I hoped, with a newfound, if grudging, respect for boundaries. Despite their simmering resentment, they could do nothing but slink away in defeat, their desperate pleas and manipulative tactics having failed utterly. A few days later, James and I, our spirits lighter than they had been in years, packed our bags again, ready for our next adventure, our next chapter. Just then, Chris brought us an unexpected invitation from his mother. After seeing my photos and watching his videos of our life, she'd expressed a strong, genuine desire to meet me in person. We gave it a little thought, then happily, curiously, accepted. When we arrived in the beautiful seaside city, where she lived and stepped into her elegant, art-filled home, I was stunned into momentary speechlessness. Chris's mother turned out to be someone I had admired, from afar, for many, many years. The renowned, reclusive vintage fashion designer, Claire Stone. Back when I was still working, before retirement and the move to Rachel's, I had stumbled upon one of her breathtaking vintage runway shows online. I'd been utterly mesmerized by the elegant silhouettes, the intricate, timeless detailing of her creations. From that day on, I'd quietly, secretly dreamed of one day owning, perhaps even wearing, one of her exquisite designs. But life, as it so often does, had gotten in the way. Family responsibilities, endless household chores, the gradual erosion of my own sense of self. And that fragile dream had been slowly, sadly, tucked away, almost forgotten. Now, standing here, in her beautiful studio, surrounded by her incredible work, I felt nothing but a profound, overwhelming gratitude for the choices I'd finally made, the path I'd finally found. I had, at long last, returned to living for myself. Claire and I connected instantly, a surprising, joyful meeting of kindred spirits. We spoke for hours at length about our shared passion for vintage fashion, about the enduring power of femininity, and about the subtle, often underappreciated art of timeless style. She graciously took me on a tour through her meticulously organized studio, pausing at last in front of a mannequin, draped respectfully with a soft muslin cloth. With a proud, almost reverent gleam in her discerning eyes, she carefully lifted the fabric. "This," she said, her voice filled with a quiet passion, "this is the piece I'm most proud of in my entire career. But ever since it was finished, I've never ever found the right person to truly wear it, to embody its spirit. I've tried countless models, even a few celebrities, but none of them, not one, captured the essence, the soul I had imagined for it when I designed it. Then I saw you in Chris of Ido. The moment I slipped into that breathtaking vintage dress, I could feel it too, an almost mystical connection. It wasn't just about the perfect, flattering fit. It was a profound, perfect harmony between the style of the garment and the spirit of the wearer. What had once seemed like an ordinary, if beautiful, floral pattern on the fabric seemed to come alive on me, exuding an unexpected poise, a radiant warmth, a quiet confidence I hadn't felt in decades. Claire, her eyes shining, immediately, impulsively, invited me to be the finale model for her upcoming, highly anticipated vintage runway show, wearing that very dress. I was ecstatic, giddy with an almost childlike delight, like a young girl chasing a long-forgotten, cherished dream for the very first time. To prepare for this unexpected, thrilling opportunity, I trained rigorously for 2 hours every single day, diligently practicing my walk, refining my posture, learning the subtle nuances of runway presence. It wasn't easy at first, my body unaccustomed to such demands. James would often watch me, drenched in sweat but smiling, his brow furrowed with a gentle, loving concern. "Don't push yourself too hard, Emily," he'd worry. But I'd always smile back at him, my heart full, and tell him, "Darling, I've lived most of my life just surviving. For the very first time, I finally, truly feel alive." He eventually stopped trying to dissuade me. Instead, he became my quiet, unwavering support system, managing everything behind the scenes, making sure I had everything I needed, his pride in me, a silent, powerful motivator. And on the day of the show, I stepped out onto that brightly lit runway as the closing act, the grand finale. No one in that sophisticated, fashion-savvy audience expected a woman well past 60 to be the brightest, most captivating presence on that stage. But I wasn't nervous. My makeup, expertly applied, was flawless. My steps were sure, graceful, and imbued with a newfound quiet confidence, each movement filled with an effortless ease that belied my age. The crowd, after a moment of stunned silence, erupted in a spontaneous, thunderous applause. Cameras flashed, a dazzling cacophony of light, all focused on me. In that exhilarating, transformative moment, I felt 20 years old again, bold, radiant, utterly unstoppable. I spotted James in the front row, his dear face illuminated, his eyes shining, full of an overwhelming pride and a love so profound it took my breath away. And just like that, my heart fluttered like a young girl, in love for the very first magical time. Soon after, the runway video of my unexpected fashion show debut went viral online, spreading like digital wildfire across continents. People weren't just amazed by my appearance, by the novelty of an older model stealing the show. They were deeply, genuinely moved by the story behind the images, by the way I had refused to surrender to the conventional expectations of age, by the courageous way I had chosen to reclaim my life, to live it fully, joyfully, on my own terms. They started calling me, affectionately, the vintage goddess. But what none of us, least of all James, ever expected was that he became an internet sensation too, in his own quiet way. A poignant photograph, captured by a talented young event photographer, showed him in the front row of the fashion show, his eyes literally glowing with unadulterated admiration and love as he watched me walk the runway. It was a powerful, candid image, and it quickly spread across various social media platforms, touching hearts everywhere. Chris, ever the savvy content creator, also posted a beautifully edited video, artfully piecing together candid clips of James bustling around backstage before the show, diligently helping me with everything from fastening tricky shoe buckles to adjusting delicate accessories, his devotion evident in every gesture. The comments poured in by the thousands. This is what real, enduring love truly looks like, one particularly popular comment read. When James and I read that one together, we looked at each other and burst into quiet, happy laughter. It was all both incredibly touching and just a little bit surreal. After that, we were invited to more and more fashion events, sometimes as guests, sometimes, to my continued astonishment, with me as a participant. Time passed, a gentle, flowing river, but it never dimmed the rekindled light in our eyes, the joy in our shared journey. Then one day, about 6 months later, I saw Rachel again. It was at another vintage fashion show, a smaller, more intimate affair. The show had just ended. The models had taken their final bows, and the audience was still seated, an appreciative buzz filling the air, when she suddenly burst out from a darkened corner of the venue, and to my utter shock and dismay, dropped to her knees on the polished floor directly in front of me. It had been another full 6 months since we had last seen her, since that disastrous confrontation at our little cottage. She looked like a completely different person. Her usually immaculate hair was disheveled, her face pale and haggard, noticeably thinner than before, her eyes hollow, filled with an almost unbearable exhaustion and a profound, desperate defeat. "Mom! Dad!" she cried, her voice already breaking with unshed tears. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, she spun around and shouted frantically toward the shadowy corner from which she had emerged. "Owen! Owen! Come on out now! Say hi to Grandma and Grandpa!" She had brought Owen with her. But the boy, now older but clearly traumatized, clung desperately to the wall, his small face buried in his hands, crying uncontrollably. "I don't want them," he screamed, his voice a thin, reedy wail of pure distress. "I want to go home. I want Grandpa Jay and Grandma Anna." Rachel tried to pull him over towards us, but he wouldn't budge, his small body rigid with resistance. In her mounting frustration and desperation, she began pushing and shoving him, even, to my horror, hitting him in her exasperation. Owen's sobs grew louder, more hysterical, echoing eerily across the now mostly empty runway venue. The chaotic, distressing scene immediately drew unwelcome attention. People began to surround them, murmuring amongst themselves, pointing, whispering. With the timely and professional help of the event security staff, we managed to gently extricate Rachel and a still sobbing Owen from the public spectacle and bring them into a quiet, private backstage lounge. Finally, away from the noise and the curious, judgmental eyes, she told us, between gasping sobs, what had happened over the past 6 tumultuous months. David, her husband, our former son-in-law, had been arrested for bribery and corruption in connection with his failed business dealing. He'd been tried, convicted, and subsequently sentenced to 8 long years in prison. I froze for a moment, absorbing the shocking news. But the more I thought about it, the less surprised I actually was. David had always been arrogant, impulsive, and constitutionally incapable of taking responsibility for his actions. Always chasing shortcuts, always trying to game the system instead of doing things the right, honest way. For years, they'd surreptitiously used our good credit, our established bank accounts, to build their own financial credibility, to grease palms, and to curry favor with influential people. I'd warned him once, years ago, after a particularly shady business deal he'd boasted about. David, just do what you're actually capable of. Don't try to constantly fake your way through everything. It will catch up with you eventually. But he had just sneered at me, his expression one of utter contempt for my perceived naivety. That's such old school, outdated thinking, Emily. These days, it's all about leverage and connections. If there's a shortcut available, only a fool wouldn't take it. I remembered that moment so clearly, the quiet, prescient chill that had crept through me then. I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that trouble would inevitably come. Sure enough, he had pulled the same reckless stunt again, this time to try and land a lucrative city development project. He had even, foolishly, mortgaged their already financially strained house to take out a massive, high-interest loan, ostensibly to secure the necessary connections and bribe officials. He had, against all odds, actually gotten the contract, but then, predictably, had neglected the actual work, drowning himself in celebratory dinners and endless rounds of booze with his new associates. The project had quickly, spectacularly, fallen apart under his gross mismanagement and neglect, leading to huge financial losses for everyone involved. This, his imprisonment, was the inevitable, tragic end to his house of cards. Rachel sobbed, her body shaking. Since he went to prison, I've been so afraid to even leave the house. The neighbors, they talk behind my back, I know they do. The kids at Owen's school, they tease him relentlessly. I'm falling apart, Mom, Dad. Owen's just a child. That toxic environment is terrible for him. I want to bring him here to live with you, please. Her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, were full of a desperate, pleading hope. James, his face unreadable, answered calmly, his voice devoid of any discernible emotion. Didn't Owen explicitly say he loves being with his real grandparents, Jay and Anna? Well, now, Rachel, it seems your little preferred family is finally back together. Seems like a perfect fit, doesn't it? Rachel panicked, her eyes darting wildly between us. Dad, no, they don't know how to properly care for him. They don't even really love him. Not like you do. They don't know what he's allergic to. Last time he stayed with them, he had a severe allergic reaction to some nuts they gave him. He went into anaphylactic shock. They weren't even home when it happened. They'd left him alone with a teenage babysitter. If I hadn't gotten back in time, he could have died. James shook his head, his expression still unmoved. That, Rachel, is your problem to solve now. If his other grandparents are careless, then as his mother, it's entirely on you to be more responsible to ensure his safety. Rachel, grasping for another angle, another emotional lever, cried out, But the loan. The loan David took out against the house. It's coming due any day now. I have absolutely no way to repay it. The bank is going to foreclose on the house. Where are Owen and I supposed to live then? On the streets. To live then. On the streets. James remained steady, his voice implacable. Once the house is auctioned off by the bank, Rachel, you'll receive whatever equity, if any, is left over. That should be enough for you and your son to get by for a while. David's childhood home, his parents' house, it's still there, isn't it? You won't end up on the street. Rachel's face turned a ghastly shade of pale rage and utter despair battling for dominance behind her tear-filled eyes. She turned to me, her last hope. Mom, please, say something. Help us. I looked at her, my own expression carefully blank, and replied, my voice calm and clear. Your father is right, Rachel. She froze in place, her mouth falling open, and in that stark, silent instant, she finally, truly realized. This time, there would be no rescue, no turning back, no last-minute reprieve from us. She covered her mouth with a trembling hand and ran out of the room, sobbing hysterically. The media, as always, was quick to seize upon a sensational story. The moment Rachel had dramatically knelt before me at the fashion show, someone in the audience had captured it on video. It spread like wildfire online, and just like that, James and I went viral again. Only this time, the chorus of praise and admiration was largely drowned out by a tidal wave of criticism and condemnation. Keyboard warriors, self-appointed moral guardians, flooded the internet with their outraged opinions. They argued vehemently that in today's challenging world, with its sky-high living costs and suffocating societal pressures, young people were already overwhelmed, struggling to juggle demanding careers and the responsibilities of parenting. Even the smallest bit of practical help from elderly parents, whether it's cooking a simple dinner, picking up a child from school, or providing occasional childcare, could make a world of difference, they proclaimed. But what about us? They railed. We were selfish, they said, choosing our own comfort and leisure while callously turning a blind eye to our daughter's profound struggles. According to them, our behavior was cold, ungrateful, even inexplicably cruel. As these judgmental voices grew louder, more insistent, those who had once affectionately called me the vintage goddess grew noticeably quiet. Some even began to publicly question their previous admiration, their support wavering under the pressure of popular opinion. They started imagining what it would feel like if their own parents did the same thing, if they too chose to step back from their expected familial obligations to prioritize their own well-being. Suddenly, our story, our choice, didn't seem so admirable, so inspiring to them anymore. The tide of public support slowly, inexorably, shifted into a powerful wave of judgment and disapproval. After I published the article online, Chris, our dear young friend, left a heartfelt comment beneath it. He wrote, with a simple, eloquent honesty, about his time living near us in that small southern town, about the quiet, unassuming rhythm of our days. He described the early mornings when James would make breakfast for me, the peaceful moments when I would hang laundry in our sun-drenched garden, the candid photos he had taken of me smiling, truly smiling, in a favorite vintage dress, bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sunlight. He wrote, they didn't abandon anyone. They simply learned, after being hurt, after being taken for granted for so long, how to protect themselves, how to cherish their own remaining time. And just like that, as his words resonated with so many, the tide of anger in the online comments began to subside, replaced by a more thoughtful, empathetic discourse. One particular line, from an anonymous commenter, stood out among the thousands of replies, a poignant, challenging question. When you become a parent yourself, and your own child eventually treats you the exact same way, will you still think their choice to prioritize their own well-being was selfish? Because that's all they had done, after being drained, dismissed, and ultimately discarded. They simply chose to stop giving any more of themselves. And in that simple, powerful statement lay the heart of our truth.